Welcome everybody, and I'd just like to wish you first a happy World Down Syndrome Day. So Paul and Sam have very kindly agreed to lead worship for us today, so I'd like to hand over to you, Paul and Sam.
Hello, thank you very much. And we're going to begin our service by lighting the chalice. So do you want to light that for me, Sam? Remember? Like that?
Yeah.
Put it down. That's it. Now you say those words there.
I light this
Chalice.
chalice for people who are different.
Thank you, Sam. And Diana said it already, but what's the day today? Can you remember? What day is it?
If the day is Sunday or 21.
And it's something World Downs.
World something Day.
Down Syndrome Day, that's right. And who's got Down syndrome?
Hey.
You've got Down syndrome, that's right. So we're going to do the service around this. And I was explaining earlier on to Diana that I used to be a vicar many years ago, and I preached on many subjects. I've never actually talked about this in a service. As I mentioned Sam, it's never really come up. Diana invited me to do the service on the 21st of March, back in, I don't know, January, February time. And within an hour, I got a text from Sam, the cake that he'd made, and on it was the words, World Down Syndrome Day, 21st of March, 2020. And I thought serendipity meant being asked to do that, kind of had to talk about it. And then I thought, well, Sam could help us with the service. So that's happening today. So just to begin to set the context, Down syndrome is so named for a man called Dr. Langdon Down, who worked in the asylums in London. And he noticed in the 1800s, he noticed there were a group of people who he said if you put them together, they could look as if they're from the same family. And he called them, and by the way, everything I'm going to say today, Sam knows what I'm going to say. So if it feels awkward, don't worry, Sam's very comfortable about what I'm saying. Down called these people, called it Mongolian idiocy, which is not a particularly pleasant thought. And there was also a weird kind of notion that it was some sort of evolutionary throwback, and that the people of this idea that really developed in Europe that Western white people were the height of evolution, and that really Down syndrome was a throwback, and somehow Sam was related to less human beings that exist over in Mongolia. So it's both hideous to people with Down syndrome and hideous kind of racism as well. Anyway, in 1961, until 1961, Mongolian idiocy changed to Down syndrome. And a lot of people thought, well, did it exist before because it hadn't been mentioned? It appears that it did. And just to demonstrate that, some people decided to have a look at ancient art. And I want to show you two of those. Now, Diana, so we'll share the first one. If you could share that with us, Diana. So here you see a screen. Now this image here is from, now I need to read this, it's from the Tolqueta culture in Mexico in the 5th century AD. You can see fairly clearly, I think, by the shape of the eyes, the shape of the nose, this is almost certainly somebody with Down syndrome. Also the open mouth and the protruding tongue. Sam doesn't have a protruding tongue, do you, Sam? Because nowadays a lot of work is done with speech therapists early in life, it would have been normal for people with Down syndrome to have that. So we think, or it is thought, that this, they've done various measurements. This is almost certainly the image of somebody from the 5th century AD who had Down syndrome. You'll notice as well that his ears, he's got the protruding, the kind of big earring, so, and the hat. And it's one of a series of images of other people who don't have Down syndrome. And so there's nothing different. So clearly in this culture, this human being, whoever's depicted here, was a normal part of the culture. And it's interesting, at about the same time in 5th century France, they discovered a plague graveyard in which there is the body of a 7-year-old girl who clearly had Down syndrome, but she has all the same grave goods as everybody else in there, so it doesn't seem to have been treated any differently. I think that's very important because, you know, sometimes we think we're so enlightened. I'm not sure how enlightened we really are. Certainly going back to the 5th century AD, it appears that people with Down syndrome were fully accepted, at least at some level, in some cultures. The next image is even more interesting. So could we have that, please, Anna? Brilliant. Okay. So this is, again, I need to read this. The Adoration of the Christ Child by a follower of Jan Joest of Calca in 1515. Now, if you look, first of all, there are two characters here. The first one is kind of hovering above the Christ Child, appearing behind a pillar. If you look, he's been, and that's the one on the bottom right that's been blown up. Again, this is almost certainly the image of someone with Down syndrome. That's right, Diana. The other one is the angel to the left of Mary's shoulder. What I find utterly fascinating about these two images is that, and there are many depictions of this scene. This is the only one that appears to have two people with Down syndrome. One of the things that almost really helps us to believe it is Down syndrome is you'll notice the angel's fingers are slightly shorter. It's another shorter than the other characters in there, and that's another sign of Down syndrome, is having shorter fingers. But I think how can we know what somebody's trying to tell us in 1515? What I'm guessing is, because we know this is what happened later, people with any kind of learning disability, especially if it had a facial disfigurement with it, would be hidden away. The character that we see at the bottom right, if you notice, is peering behind a pillar, almost just being allowed, is sort of allowed to have a look, but isn't really part of the scene. Almost like here on Earth, if you have Down syndrome or some condition like it, you're not really fully accepted. Then the angels appear. The angels seem to just fully accept. So somehow, in an ideal world, people with Down syndrome are fully accepted. And I like to imagine that the artist possibly had a brother or a child himself, or almost certainly himself, with Down syndrome. And I think that, and there are other images as well. There's a 17th century picture of a duchess with a daughter who clearly has Down syndrome. So by looking through art, we can see that the condition has existed and at some level was accepted before anybody knew what it was. You can stop sharing now, Diana, and we will sing our first hymn, which I think we should have sung first. Now, let me just say about the hymns, two things that I've done with today's service. One is there are no readings, because people with Down syndrome have a much visual memory and a much better visual intelligence oral. So that's why that, if you like, is for a reading, and later on there's a little scene. The hymns I've picked, I've not picked on any grounds that it's relevant, except one, to the subject, simply that Sam knows these hymns and he can sing them. So our first one is Morning Has Broken. When I was looking for readings or whatever to do, I kind of got a little bit annoyed because everything was heroic things people with learning disability have done. People who've managed to do a marathon or whatever. And actually, most people with learning disabilities just live ordinary lives, struggle. And I just found that film particularly moving. So if we could sing our next hymn, which I know is I think, is it with It's one of the strange things. I've never been a great fan of evangelical choruses that repeat and repeat and repeat. Actually, for people with learning disabilities, they're utterly fantastic because you can learn them very quickly and easily. So you like marching in the light of God, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay. So, right, Sam, when were you born? Can you remember?
The 7th of February 1999.
7th of February 1999. So you're a 20th century boy, man, just. So I wonder if the people there have worked out how old you are. See if they've worked out. If you were born on the 7th of February 1999, you are how old?
22.
22. That's right. It's interesting how many people ask me the question, even now, and it might be worth you're asking yourself the question and then asking ourselves why people ask it. Did you know Sam was going to have Down syndrome before he was born? Interesting question. For the record, no. So there he was, 1999. It was a Sunday morning. I'd only just moved. I was just a brand new vicar in Teesside. I actually had my dog collar on. And I saw Sam was born, and I knew. I just said to the nurse, once he was born, I said, "The child's got Down syndrome." And she said, "Oh, lots of people get worried. Don't worry about it." And anyway, a bit later on, it was found that he did. Interestingly enough, and I don't know what to think about this, but it seemed moving at the time. The consultant at North Tees Hospital was a man by the name of Dr. Harry Kumar. And he came to me and he noticed I was wearing a dog collar. He said, "I see you're a Christian." And I said, "Yes." He said, "I'll tell you this." He said, "Have a child with Down syndrome. In my culture, you would be considered to be blessed because you will learn compassion." I'm not sure I've learned compassion, but what I do know is that I do feel blessed. I think it's quite important, really, because I'm not sure if you told it was going to happen, I would have considered that was the case. So Sam was born. Where did we live when you were born? You remember? Norton? Stockton. You've always lived in Stockton, haven't you? So you were born, and interestingly enough, Sam was actually the third child. How many brothers and sisters have you, Sam? You remember? We better say all their names.
Freddie, Ray, Jorge, Ellie, and Jeff.
Yeah. So you've got Ellie and Jess who are older than you. And one thing I noticed after Sam had been born is how the cards which arrived to say congratulations took a little bit longer. It was almost as if people were pausing. What do we do? And shockingly, even now, and I've explained this to Sam before, so Sam knows, somebody actually sent a condolence card. Which is interesting, isn't it? I did that thing, I suppose, that some people do. I had to learn fast. I was aware of people with Down syndrome. I'd obviously met people with Down syndrome, but I didn't know much about it. I don't want to talk a huge amount about Down syndrome itself, except I found myself fascinated. Sam has got a particular form of Down syndrome, the most common, called trisomy 21. So for those of you who aren't aware, and many people aren't, each one of us has got 23 pairs of genes. chromosomes, should I say, 23 pairs. So you've got, and they're numbered, one, interestingly boringly, they're numbered from 1 to 22. Then you've either got an X and a Y chromosome, or you've got 2 X chromosomes. Obviously, if you've got a Y chromosome, that means you're like me and Sam. If you don't have a Y chromosome, you're like most of the other people on this call. In other words, that makes men and women. Numbers are quite interesting. So the number 1 has got the most genetic material on it, along with X. Number 1 has got the most genetic material on, and then number 22 least in the pairs, and they kind of go down like that. So trisomy 21 is Sam. Well, all of us here in this room are likely to have 46 chromosomes. Sam has got 47. He's got an extra 21st chromosome. You can have a trisomy on any one of your chromosomes. If you have it on 22, and nobody's likely to know, it doesn't seem to have any effect on you because that's the smallest. If you have it on anything higher than 21, it will have a profound and massive effect on you. Trisomy 21 is a very particular thing, and almost, if you look at Sam, you can see the sort of things, the genetic material that is provided on 21st chromosome. Something about the shape of your eyes, something about the shape of your hands, something about the shape of your neck. So that, as Dan noticed, if you didn't know about Down syndrome and you saw Sam next to his friend Reese Rogers, who is a lovely human being, isn't he? You like Reese? Yeah. Just tell you a story about Reese. I love this story. Reese was sitting in a park one day. Reese is a very different character to Sam. He's got tattoos, muscles. Sitting in a park one day, and some kids who were older than him came and started teasing him for his Down syndrome. So he hit one of them over the head with a brick. And when the police came round to see him, the policeman said, "Is there a man here called Reese Rogers?" This is true. The policeman went, and his dad said, "Yeah, he's here." And the policeman went in, looked at him and went, "Oh, shit." Because, excuse my French, but you can imagine how that happened and the police just sort of said, "Don't do it again." But I thought, I don't think you'd ever hit anyone over the head with a brick, would you?
No.
No, you're not. You're quite gentle, aren't you? What's your favourite television programme?
Game shows and
Strictly Come Dancing. And when we get the chance, we go and see the live show afterwards, don't we? The Strictly Come Dancing live show. That's right.
Yeah.
People who like Strictly Come Dancing aren't the sort of people who hit people over the head with bricks. I don't think. Of course, what I realised fairly quickly was the number of chromosomes that Sam has, or had when he was born, fairly irrelevant, actually. What we had was a baby. And once I'd learned that, I thought, well, I'm not really bothered about that. I think the first challenge it gave to me was that I think I was, and Christine thinks still am, of an intellectual snob. And it was very healthy for me to be faced with, where, like my older children, it's how are you going to do? How are you going to be successful? Are you thinking? Are you learning? You have to rethink things when you've got someone like Sam. Because Down syndrome means, we were talking about this today, you find it harder to learn things, don't you? But you've done very well. You've learned to read. You can read, can't you?
Yep.
You know the first thing Sam learned to read? He saw big yellow M's and he could read the word McDonald's. Yeah. You used to read McDonald's very easily, didn't you? But of course, all human beings are intellectual snobs. What do we call ourselves? Homo sapiens sapien. Homo wise. We distinguish ourselves from the animals because we see ourselves as cleverer than them. Look at our intellectual achievements. Look, we created the vaccine in a year. And we see this as somehow, and in those days when people like Langdon Down saw that intellectual ability was somehow the crowning achievement of evolution. And in some parts of the world, in the 1930s, people who hadn't achieved that because of their race or their learning disability were called, and the word sends a chill on our spine, Untermensch, German. And many people like Sam were sent to the gas chambers because they were subhuman. And throughout history, people with learning disabilities have been hidden away. Even now, you can have a termination of a pregnancy right up to the day before birth. There's been a diagnosis of Down syndrome in the baby. And we know that in the US, 67% of people who have a fetus with Down syndrome will terminate. In France, it's 77%. In Denmark, 98%. And as far as we know, Iceland, 100%. And I'm not criticizing individuals for those choices. And I do think a woman has every right to do what she wants with her body. I think it's very interesting, isn't it? What are we saying about what we think human beings should be? Isn't it interesting how I think what people are terminating is an idea, not a person? Because conversely, when people, and nowadays you can bring a live birth, an incredibly premature birth, and suddenly you have a baby which is grow up to be much more learning disabled than Sam, but people do anything to keep that child alive. So we will keep a child alive once we see the child, but the idea, not too happy with. So how has it affected me? Where did Dr. Hari Kumar? Well, first thing I would say is, I love you, Sam, don't I? I think you love me. Let me tell you a story. 2 years ago, Sam's sister married. Where did she get married, Sam? Yes, where did Jess get married?
In France.
In France. She married a Frenchman. And she invited me to speak at her wedding. And I showed off and preached in both French and English. I do speak a bit of French, but I got somebody to help me so that it sounded better French than I can actually speak. But one of the things I said to Jess's husband, Louis, in that sermon was, you have to understand, Louis, you will never be the most important man in Jess's life. And I said, and I'm not talking about myself here. I'm talking about Sam. And Jess started to cry because he has that effect on everyone who knows him. Sam doesn't, you don't make demands, do you? You don't say, can I have this, can I have that?
No.
Don't. You're a very undemanding, a very accepting, a very lovely human being. Everybody, I think, who knows you found that. When he finished at school, he went to Abbey Hill in Stockton, which is a learning disabled school. Sam was voted by the other pupils to be the top student who left. So Sam has this effect on people. All I would say is, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done if I had known that Sam was going to be born with Down syndrome. What I do know is he is among the best things that has ever happened to me. Oh, yeah. Candle's gone out. Is that what you're pointing out?
Yeah.
And there's wax on the carpet. We'll be in trouble, won't we? It was you. It was Sam. Sam did that. So Christine, Sam did that. Okay. So where was I going? I don't want to get too gooey about this. Simply to say, But if I could change Sam, if there was a way of removing extra chromosome, I would never dream of doing it. I wouldn't want to do it, because if we did that, we wouldn't have Sam. And I guess, we talk about increasingly Black Lives Matter, women's lives matter. How good are we as a society with people with learning disabilities? Sam's 22 now. He's still in education. Where do you go to college? Riverside College. He also volunteers. Gets a volunteering job I work for the NHS, and he works in the office that I work in, volunteering. What do you do in your job? Laminating. Printing. Photocopying.
Yeah.
And filing, don't you?
Yeah. And also have making people a cup of tea.
And you make people a cup of tea, that's right, you do that. That's all voluntary. And I just wonder, will he get a job? Is society ready to employ people like Sam? Everybody can look at Sam and smile and say, but actually, how good are we as a society at really radical acceptance? Leave it at that thought, and it's been great. Have you enjoyed talking to these people?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So we'll sing our next hymn, shall we? Maybe now we can just pause and remember anyone that we see in our world who we think might have a learning disability. People in our community. Ask ourselves how accepted they are. Think about vulnerable people and the way it can easily be misused or abused. Thanks for everyone who works with people with learning disabilities. And think about what it might be that we could do to make people feel more accepted in our communities. Say together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power and glory, forever and ever. Amen. So we've just about ended the service. I thought Sam's got some words to say at the end. You want to say those last words?
Everybody go in peace.
Thank you, Sam. And I don't know if now that we're more or less done, if anybody's got any comments they want to make or any questions they'd like to ask Sam or me, then go ahead.
I just want to thank you both very much for a really interesting and very moving service. More than anything, it's been an absolute pleasure to have both of you and to meet you, Sam. So thank you from us. Anyone else? I'll throw the floor open.
I wanted to say thank you very much for the beautiful pictures and the look at the history of people with Down syndrome and disabilities in our society. I hadn't seen those before, so it was fascinating to see them.
Yeah, there's more if you wanted to have a look. It is fascinating. Of course, people wonder, because people living in quite small communities, they maybe only knew one person, so they probably didn't know there was a community. But the other thing I was reading about is, as I said, Sam's visual memory is as good as anybody else's. In a pre-literate society, I wonder whether people with Down syndrome were seen as quite as disabled as we see them, who put such a privilege on learning. Just a thought.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. Thank you to Paul and Sam. That was a fascinating and very touching service. But also, the two paintings you showed, Paul, the one with the little angel and the little boy peeping round the corner. Well, I'm only looking on my phone, but I think there's a third character.
Another one of the little angels?
No, there's somebody standing at the back.
Oh, really?
Similar. I don't know, but anyway, it was fascinating to see those images. So, but thank you again to both of you. And also, I really enjoyed the songs and the hymns. They were great.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Ben would like to speak.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on what you were saying about whether Sam could ever get a job, and I think certainly Sam could get a job. Most of the things that he does in his volunteering, I do at work as a library assistant. Laminating, photocopying, printing. There's all sorts of skills in that which are definitely employable. I know at Newcastle City Council, we sometimes offer work placement, internships for people with various learning difficulties. If Sam's interested in that kind of work, then you should definitely get in touch with the library service in Stockton.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I think we've got plans, and I think, to be honest, I think he'll probably do all right because he's got fairly articulate, fairly forthright parents who will fight for him. I guess my concern is people who aren't quite that forthright and get neglected, really.
Right, finally then, I'd just like to say a final thank you to Paul and Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for your time and thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.